Hi everybody, Captain Tim here with today's episode of Star Trek Voyager, Season 1, Episode 1, The Caretaker. This is a fantastic pilot. I don't care what anybody says, this is a great pilot. So, to start off with, this came out about halfway through Season 3 of Deep Space Nine, the past tense episode. So, just to kind of put that into perspective for you guys. And I love it. If you look at the Next Generation pilot, the Deep Space Nine pilot, and the Voyager pilot, and even the Enterprise pilot, the four, modern shows, I would say this is the best pilot. Even Discovery, I would say Voyager's better than. Maybe not The Cage, because The Cage was a great pilot episode. But I would say, they're pretty far up there. Voyager, it was a really engaging episode, and I just thought it was really interesting, and I really, really liked it. It starts out with a text scroll talking all about the Maquis, which is very similar to the Deep Space Nine pilot, how that had to start a text scroll, and it was all about the battle with the Borg. So that was great. Tim Russ is one of the first characters we see as Tuvok, and this is his fourth role now, because he played a criminal in the Next Generation. He played one of the helmsmen in the Star Trek Generations movie, and he played a Klingon on Deep Space Nine. So this is Tim Russ's fourth role in Star Trek, and now it's a major reoccurring role. So that's great for Tim Russ. We also meet Tom Paris, who there's so much that we could talk about with Paris, where when the writers were first writing Voyager, they wanted a Nick Locarno type character, and that was the character from First Duty, the one where Wesley gets in trouble because one of his classmates dies. And Robert Duncan McNeill played Nick in that episode, and that's kind of the character they wanted, and so they wrote Tom Paris around it, and then they still get Robert Duncan McNeill to play the character. Supposedly, the only thing that kept them from actually just making him Nick was the fact that they would have to pay every single episode of Voyager, they would have to pay the writers the royalties for it, and so they were like, screw it, let's just make a new character. But it's almost impossible for me to watch Voyager and just not see Nick. By the time we get to the end, it's Tom Paris is kind of his own character, but I definitely see Nick throughout the series. I love how when they introduce Janeway, she's talking to Tom, and she says, oh, I was a science officer for your father. And I cannot imagine Janeway in a blue uniform, no matter how hard I try. I don't know if we ever do, but I just can't imagine her being a science officer. And I don't realize, how many times throughout the series we actually see that side of her coming out. Even the very next episode where her and B'Elanna have to talk about how to get out of the ice, and and they come up with ideas. Her science part is coming out, and it's really kind of interesting. We learn all about Tom Paris being in the Maquis, which again, we could totally see Nick joining the Maquis. I didn't read. I saw an interview on the DVDs with Armin Shimmerman, and how he talked about how the previous series always has a character in the pilot for the new series, or used to until we got to Discovery. And how it's kind of an honored role. If you look at the Next Generation, it was Bones, and you look at Deep Space Nine, it was Picard, and Armin Shimmerman was so honored that he was chosen to be that character to basically send off Voyager and show them the ropes. And it's kind of a great scene with Quark and Harry Kim talking, and I love it because he's oh, these rare jewels come from a creature called the Morn, and you can almost just see Morn sitting in the background, but it's kind of a great scene. We learn a lot about Janeway in this first episode, and I kind of have a relationship to her where she's talking to her husband. I don't know if they actually say the connection between him, but they don't live together, so that has to just be boyfriend, girlfriend. But how her dog is about to give birth, and he's is this one of those you love me, you love my dog things? And that's kind of how I am with my husband. We have that cliche Facebook where my wife wanted a dog, but I didn't want a dog, so we compromised and we got 2 dogs. Well, now I have 7 animals, so I feel that on a spiritual level. I love the scene where Paris goes to the replicator and he's give me tomato soup. There are 14 varieties. Give me plain tomato soup, hot or cold. hot plain tomato soup. And I just love how there's that many differences. And I always think about that, like, because especially when I was younger, I used to write like little fan fiction about like, if I was abducted by Starfleet, like what would my life be like? And like, how would I teach them about what it's like to be in the 90s? Because that's when I was young and watched the show. And like, especially like hot chocolate, like Counselor Troy was always obsessed with like chocolate, everything, and like how could I like have a sip of it and be like, oh no, you got to make this with whole milk, and you got to add this kind of chocolate, and you got to do this, and like just blow her mind with like all of the different varieties of chocolate. I don't know, that's like me, like little kid me, like, oh, I should come up with this food in the future. Like I wonder if like Captain Picard ever had a grilled cheese. Like those are the type of stories I wrote as a little kid. Finally, they are thrown over 70,000 light years. I think later on they say it's like 75 or whatever. But it's 75 years at maximum warp into the Delta Quadrant to get home. And so, I don't know, I also read something years and years ago about how Voyager was more like what Gene Roddenberry had envisioned than the original Star Trek was. Because like it's has that futuristic thing, but Gene Roddenberry always wanted like to explore where no man has gone before. Whereas a lot of Star Trek and even the Next Generation, we kind of play it safe in our own galaxy with the Vulcans and the Betazoids, and even there are the villains of the series like the Klingons and the Romulans. But we can always just go back to Earth if it gets too scary out there, whereas Voyager's completely out there in the middle of nowhere, and they can't do anything about it. So I don't know how true that is. I think it's a really interesting concept, but I like it. We meet the emergency medical hologram, the doctor, and I think this is a great character. Like we always kind of have that type of non-emotional type character. Like first we had Spock, and then we had Data, and to a lesser extent in Deep Space Nine it would be Odo, I guess. And then for this one, the character who is one of a kind by himself would be the Doctor, the emergency medical hologram, which they do a lot of great stuff throughout the series, like giving him the mobile emitter and stuff like that. Kim and B'Elanna get kidnapped. We meet Neelix, we meet the Okampas, which Kes is kind of a love-hate relationship with her. Like, I think she's interesting, but I'm kind of glad when she's gone. And then, but her return, that episode has like scarred me for life. When she comes back and she's like an older woman. I like how at the end of the episode they do give hope to the future because there's another caretaker out there that they have to find. And then it just kind of ends with Janeway saying, like, set a course for home. Like, overall, I think this was a great pilot. I really enjoyed it. I really, really liked it. And I'm kind of curious what other people think about it. So, I'm super excited. I would say Voyager's probably one of my favorite shows, and I would even go on a limb and say it's my favorite Star Trek show. Like, I like the plot of Voyager the most, but I like the cast of the Next Generation more. So if I could take that cast, but put them in the Voyager situations, it would be the perfect show, in my opinion. But overall, I'm super excited to watch this with you guys. A lot of you have been asking about Voyager, so I'm hoping I get a lot of responses from this one. To be honest with you, I think I'm going to stop uploading the video and just link it from my YouTube over, just because it takes so much time to upload it in both places. I can just upload it to my YouTube and then give you guys the link, and then it's done. So let me know what you guys think about Voyager. Let me know what you guys think about this episode as a pilot and just compared to the rest of the series and the rest of the franchise. Thank you guys for everything. I'm super excited to go through this show with you, and I will see you guys next time for Parallax.